Well, thank you very much for sitting down with us, Commissioner. Look forward to the conversation. We'll be sitting down with your opponent in a couple of weeks, asking the same question. So, you're going to be evenly grilled here, I guess. So, the first question that I have, I think, is probably the one that most voters have, and that's, why do you believe that you're the candidate who's best positioned to unseat the current governor?
For a lot of reasons. First of all, I've been able to win our state as a Democrat. The only one since 2012, since Barack Obama was able to win Florida, was I able to win. And so I've been our standard bearer for 3.5 years, taking on Ron DeSantis, taking on and challenging him every step along the way, and stepping into his shoes on a normal basis, whether it is monkeypox now, or whether it was COVID-19, or any of the other issues that have gone on in the last 3.5 years. And what's going to happen is the excitement and the energy that comes out of my win in the primary, that's going to catapult us across the entire state and across the entire country to wake up. Whereas if you have a Chris versus DeSantis, there are no more moving parts. Everybody knows both of them, universally known. Whereas in my case, this is there's new excitement, new information, and that's really what's going to take to really combat some of this stuff. And as Commissioner of Agriculture, I also know that I can get into the rural communities, some of those areas that Democrats have not been able to go to. And lastly, with the Roe decision, there's a lot of women, both on Democrats, Republicans, and independents, that are looking for that fierce fighter, looking for somebody who's going to stand up, who is going to protect them. And the fact that I have done that my whole life, that I've shown that leadership the last 3.5 years, and I'm trusted on this issue, is why we're going to have an opportunity to get a lot more of those women votes that unfortunately Charlie can't do, and Charlie doesn't excite the base. And this is a time when we're going to need to excite our base, be able to pull independents, and make sure that we're also targeting Republican women and other Republicans who are willing to cross over for us.
The state's property insurance crisis is obviously top of mind for many Florida voters. We saw the special session earlier this year, but still we're seeing this issue get worse and worse. What specifically do you see as the biggest problem in the market, and legislatively, what would you do to try and correct that?
Look, I think the biggest problem right now is that we have so many of our companies that are leaving the state or are dropping policies. And the citizens insurance market is supposed to be the insurer of last resort, not the only resort. And what the legislature has done, and now the governor, is forcing policies into citizens. So God forbid that we get a hurricane during the cycle, we're in a lot of trouble. And so what the legislature should have been able to do, and this is going to go very into the weeds, but basically every insurance company has to buy what's called reinsurance. Basically, it's insurance for the insurance companies. And the reinsurance market for the last couple of years has become extremely expensive. And so our insurance companies weren't able to place some of this reinsurance, which is why they're becoming insolvent and have a liability on their hands. What should have happened is our insurance companies, our domestic insurance companies, should have been able to go to what's called the CAT fund, which is the reinsurer of our state, and be able to let the CAT fund participate in the reinsurance marketplace. That way it would have reduced the rates for the insurance companies, be able to get that reinsurance and have created a stability in the marketplace. That didn't happen. And on top of that, what the SBA did, which consists of the governor, chief financial officer, and the attorney general, did last month is they put a 13% rate increase on the CAT fund. So now that's going to be another $150 million onto the homeowners insurance companies. And so again, that's a double whammy. So what I would have done differently is make sure that we held CAT fund completely at a 0% rate increase and allowed our domestic market to actually participate with the CAT fund. That would have stabilized the market. We have created an instability right now that is allowing more companies to have to go insolvent and more forced placement into the insurance into citizens.
Florida is also facing a t-shirt shortage here in Duval County. Basically, some are now voting, but on the August 23rd, most voters will be weighing in on whether or not to increase taxes on themselves in order to help fill that gap. We've obviously seen Governor DeSantis raise the minimum starting teacher pay to $47,500. What would you do differently? How would you address the teacher shortage?
Look, we have a real crisis going on. We have about 9,000 teacher shortage across the entire state as we're getting into the start of the school year. What we have done is we've created a war zone for our teachers and for our school systems. Not only are teachers having to be the parents, they're being the guardians, they're being the teachers, they're being the mental health counselors. Now they're asked to be the security guards, saying whether or not they can be sued depending on what they say, what they don't say, and they're not being paid enough. I don't blame our teachers for not wanting to participate in the education system right now. What we should be doing is providing more resources to the entire school system in totality. During a Freed administration, we would be doubling the per pupil funding over the course of the 4 years. That way, every teacher gets a salary increase, not these bonuses, and not just for new teachers. But what happens to our senior teachers, the ones that have been in that classroom for 10 plus years, who are not seeing a bump in their salary? So making sure that we have a per pupil funding increase, doubling, helps to make sure that we are funding our teachers to the pay that they deserve. But it's not just our teachers. It is our bus drivers. It's the men and women that are working in our school lunchrooms. It's our mental health counselors. It's the administration. Right now, we are funding education at 49th in the nation. What do we expect to be happening? Of course, we're going to be crippling our education system. And without a sustainable education system for everybody, we're failing the future of our state, and this has to be a #1 priority.
Roe v. Wade, you touched on this a little bit earlier. One of maybe the interesting aspects of Florida's new 15-week ban is compared to other red states that have virtually banned abortion or nearly banned abortion, Florida actually has a bit of a liberal policy comparatively to those states. What would you address, in terms of abortion? Would it be repealing that 15-week ban? How do you address this issue?
This is an emergency. I'm already hearing stories, not just here in the state of Florida, but across the entire Southeast, of women in peril, that the decisions that are being made by legislators and governors today are literally putting women's lives in harm's way. And so day one, I am declaring a state of emergency, because that's what it is. And that way I will be able to have the ability to not put money sent down to our state attorneys who will be potentially prosecuting, whether it's doctors or providers who are producing and providing abortions. 2, we have to have a new constitutional amendment. Unfortunately, right now we have a right to privacy in the Florida Constitution. And my fear is that this Supreme Court, and unfortunately our chief judge, who was appointed by Charlie, is going to overturn the right to privacy for women when it comes to abortion. So we must have an immediate turn to a new constitutional ballot initiative that puts that right of privacy in our Constitution. 3rd, it's actually going back to the legislature. We unfortunately are going to have, at that point, almost 9 months worth of empirical evidence to show the legislature that the intended consequences in so many respects are really harming women, and potentially we might be losing some women along the way, and working with the legislature to actually reverse their decisions, because unfortunately Ron DeSantis wants to go even further, that this is what he has now, but he has made it very clear that if he is getting reelected, it's going to go further, and we might see our state of Florida at an all-out ban.
Governor Ron DeSantis has really kind of capitalized on the culture war issues, especially in education, whether it be banning CRT, teaching of sexual orientation and gender identity in schools, or even immigration battles like banning sanctuary cities a few years back. Are these culture wars worth fighting back against, and how would you do that if you're elected?
Look, this is what Ron DeSantis has done. He has created such a divide in our state. And from a Republican Party that's supposed to be about less taxes, less spending, less government overreach, free market, home rule, this governor has taken the Republican playbook and just thrown it completely out. And so the Republican Party of today, under Ron DeSantis' leadership, is contrary to all of their fundamental principles. And so what we have to be doing is going back to the basics, that we need to let local governments do what they do best. They are the voice of the people because they are the closest to the people. And because of these culture wars, all the other issues that are impacting Floridians every single day are not being addressed. Like we just talked about the insurance market, affordability when it comes to home ownership, and when it comes to our rent increases, gas, all of these things that are actually impacting people every single day. Because look, at the end of the day, if you are working 2 jobs and you're barely making ends meet, and your rent is being increased by 60%, you're not caring about the Don't Say Gay bill. You're caring about, can I afford to put my roof over my head? Can I pay for my electric bills? And when this governor is spending so much time talking about all these other things, which is just set to divide people, to put fear into what is unknown, to create these culture wars, he's forgetting the basics of what government is supposed to do. And that's to make sure that we have a state that people can thrive in, a state where people can afford to live in. And he's completely neglected all the people that have lived here for generations. And he's so focused on these culture wars to get to the White House. But at the end of the day, the people are going to vote on the economics of our state. And unfortunately, our inflation is higher than that of the national average. Our property insurance is definitely higher than that of the national average. Property taxes, our gas, everything is higher here. Ron DeSantis is bad for our economy, and these culture wars is a reason why we are where we are.
You mentioned affordable housing. How would you plan to address the affordable housing crisis in Florida? Day one,
it's a state of emergency. I have been asking him for months to do this, because no matter where I go in the state, I'm hearing the same stories. Whether it's somebody who's just graduated college and just starting their first job that are seeing 60% rent increases, to single mothers who are working two jobs, who are almost instantaneously being thrown out of their apartments because they can't afford their rent increases, or our seniors who are living on fixed incomes. The housing crisis is dire. The fact that Miami-Dade is having conversations about what to do with the homeless population, because people can't afford to live here. It is an emergency. And so when you declare an emergency, you then allow, one, our state attorneys and our attorney general to go after our predatory landlords, because that's what it is. It's predatory. It is not, the rent increase is not based on inflation, which is about 11 to 12% here in Florida. This is pure greed. So going after them for that greed purposes, allowing the local governments to be working directly with the state government and federal government to figure out ways to use resources at the local level to help with rental assistance. And then here's one of the other bigger problems that we've been having for 28 straight years. That was Jeb, that was Charlie, that was Rick, and that was Ron, have all gutted the Affordable Trust Fund in a tune of $2.4 billion. That is unconscionable that money would have been taken away from building more affordable homes. So day one, when I have a state of emergency, you can start using some of that $20 billion reserve that we have right now, thanks to a Biden administration, and use that money to start pushing out more projects across the state to be building more affordable and workforce housing. Because once the supply starts to increase and the demand stays the same, then prices start to go down too when it comes to purchasing of homes.
We're getting near the end here, I promise. This one is probably one that many voters know your position on, but I'll ask it for the sake of asking it. Should marijuana be legalized, and how would you accomplish that in Florida?
Yes, it definitely needs to be legalized for lots of reasons. I'm not coming here as a career politician saying I'm reading the tea leaves and seeing where things are going and I want to legalize cannabis. Here is why cannabis must be legalized in the state of Florida. First and foremost, economic opportunities. This gives our entrepreneurs an opportunity to get involved in this very green, lucrative space. Taxable revenue for our state in the tune of billions of dollars, good paying jobs. So that's on the economic aspect of things and diversifying our economy. Second is criminal justice and social justice reform. As a past public defender, I can't tell you how many of those cases I saw where the first line of the police report was the odor of cannabis was detected, and that was the probable cause for whatever came next. And unfortunately, those targeted Black and brown communities. And so by able to take that away as a tool for our law enforcement, it not only creates a more fair justice system, takes people out of our jails and our prisons that are on low-level marijuana charges, gets people back into the system and into the economy, reduces the cost of necessities for our jails, for our public defenders, our state attorneys, our courthouses, so that now reduces the amount of money needed for the criminal justice system. And there's also healthcare reform. That there's so many people, I don't care if you're talking to somebody young or you're talking to somebody who's older, who would want to use cannabis as an alternative to pharmaceutical drugs. Gets people off of pharmaceutical drugs, that also reduces our healthcare costs. This is a win-win-win for our state. And so going in day one, I still believe that we still need a robust medical program for our patients that need to have that medical grade, also not taxable for the medical patients. But I'd also be breaking up the vertical integration of these companies that are here. We've got 22 vertical licensees, giving out more medical licenses. Already there's an issue today. The fact is that there's supposed to be one black farmer's license that should have been given out years ago, and unfortunately the governor's office is still sitting on it. That's one, and unfortunately we're still waiting for the next 20 licenses to have been handed out that we are still waiting on. So I get to come in and create a legal program that not only allows for entrepreneurs to be entrepreneurs and retailers do what they do and growers do what they want to do and helps the farmers, but it really gives an opportunity for everybody across the sector to be involved in this new green industry.
Florida has multiple weeks of early voting, no excuse absentee voting, but we have seen Republicans take steps to sort of rein in particularly those methods of voting over the past few years. What, if any, changes would you make to Florida's election law if you were governor?
A lot. Elections and that right to vote is the core of who we are as a nation. This is what democracy is built on. And making sure that everybody has access to that ballot box is essential for a working democracy. So one, we need to make sure that we are reversing some of the decisions the last 2 years in the legislature, making it easier to vote, not harder. That when you are getting a driver's license, it should be an automatic voter registration. You can register day of, but also a state holiday, because so many people that are wanting to vote work and sometimes can't always get access to the ballots. So a lot of things would be to make things easier, not harder. And unfortunately, the Republicans made it harder because they know that Democrats were voting vote by mail. We saw that huge surge in 2020. And we saw no problems with the program here in the state of Florida, but the Republicans felt they had needed to have better security on our elections, even though the only fraud that happened were from the Republicans.
You know, in terms of health care, what do you see as the greatest challenges facing Florida? What changes would you make? Medicaid
expansion has to happen. That is essential. We have such a gap in our state right now that people can't access to affordable care. We saw it, unfortunately, during the pandemic, the disparities between the haves and have-nots, those who couldn't get access to health care, not knowing who to go to when you started feeling sick and going to the emergency care centers, which is a drain on our health care system. So we need to do Medicaid expansion. And unfortunately, I feel that over the course of the last decade since we been able to expand Medicaid, most people don't even understand what that means anymore. Certainly not our elected officials. And so this is going to be something that is going to be a main priority under a Freedom administration, to be working with our legislators, explain to them that not only are they helping their constituents, but you're also going to be reducing the overall cost for our healthcare system in the state of Florida. But this is going to be something that has to be a priority for the first year.
Republicans obviously have a lot of control in Tallahassee. It's very possible that if you're elected, you could be facing a veto-proof Republican majority. How do you reach across the aisle to accomplish your policy goals, and how willing are you to compromise to make those happen?
Look, I'm not unused to that kind of situation as the only statewide elected Democrat, only member of the Florida cabinet that's a Democrat. And in 3.5 years, we have received almost 75% plus of our budget requests, passing landmark legislation, my first session on legalizing hemp in our state and other policy initiatives. So you've seen me already work across the aisles to get things accomplished. And that's how we're going to do it again. We're going to make sure that we are talking to leadership, that we are saying there is going to be more that unites us than divides us. And when you cut off the head of the snake dies. And that's what happens when you take Ron DeSantis out of the equation. And let the legislature, even though they're going to be Republican, go back to who they actually are, which is true conservatism. Those are individuals that we can work with and work towards a better Florida and work together. And if they're not willing to do that and not willing to find those areas we can find compromise on, one of the greatest powers of the governor's office is the veto pen. And so I'm going to be working across the state to make sure that we have enough Democrats to hold the line when it comes both in the House and in the Senate, but also the willingness to call special sessions. So these legislators who are used to this part-time legislating will become a lot more full-time and spend a lot more time in Tallahassee if they don't want to be working with us.
And the last question I have is, what is the biggest difference between you and your primary opponent?
Everything. I have been a Democrat since I was 17 years old. The things that I fight for today are the things that I have been fighting for my entire life. From growing up in Miami, doing soup kitchens and Habitat for Humanity, from my time at the University of Florida, where I was student body president, to fighting for homeowners during the foreclosure crisis, being in the trenches as a past public defender, fighting for our foster care kids, being able to win our state as a Democrat, the issues that I have on my ballot today and on my platform, the same things that I've been fighting for my entire life. And so the main difference is I am who I am. I don't change with the polls. I certainly am always willing to conversations, and that's what growth looks like. But I'm somebody who the people can trust, to be a true fighter, to be a true Democrat. And so I know that every voter out there who hears my message that wants to win in November and wants to have a true champion and a true fighter in that governor's office, they'll be checking my name on that ballot box.
Commissioner, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I think that's all I have for you.
Well, thanks for your time today.
Absolutely.